The turkey was golden brown. She could see it through the frost-covered window. Her turkey, in her dining room, being carved by a woman she had never seen before. Carolyn pounded on the glass. Her breath came out in white clouds. She was 8 months pregnant, wearing nothing but a thin cardigan in 23-degree weather. Her husband looked up. Their eyes met through the frost. Then he turned back to his guest and continued carving. She pounded harder, screamed his name, begged him to open the door. He reached over and pulled the curtains closed. What kind of man locks his pregnant wife outside to freeze while he feeds his mistress Thanksgiving dinner? The kind of man who took out a $2 million life insurance policy on her 6 months earlier. The kind of man who texted his mistress, "Just need to wait for the baby. After that, accidents happen in winter." The kind of man who thought he could get away with murder. He was wrong. This is the story of how Caroline Mitchell survived the coldest night of her life, how she discovered her husband's deadly plan, how she fought back against a millionaire who thought his money made him untouchable, and how she burned his entire empire to the ground. But I have to warn you, this story will make you angry. It will make you cry. It will make you question everyone you think you know. Stay with me until the end, because the way this woman gets her justice, you will never see it coming. The turkey was golden brown. Carolyn could see it through the frost-covered window. Her turkey, in her dining room, being carved by a woman she had never seen before. She pressed her palm against the glass. The cold bit into her skin like tiny needles. Inside, the chandelier cast warm amber light across the mahogany table she had picked out 3 years ago. The cranberry sauce sat in the crystal bowl her mother had given them as a wedding gift. The white linen napkins she had ironed that morning were folded into perfect swans. And Preston sat at the head of the table, her husband of 6 years, the father of the baby kicking inside her swollen belly. He was smiling at the brunette woman who occupied Caroline's chair. She pounded on the window. Her fist made a dull thud against the double-pane glass. Preston looked up. Their eyes met through the frost. He turned back to his guest and continued carving. Carolyn's breath came out in white clouds. She was 8 months pregnant. She wore only a thin cardigan over her dress. She had stepped outside 10 minutes ago to grab the forgotten cranberry sauce from the car. Just a quick trip, 30 seconds at most. The door had locked behind her. She stumbled around to the front entrance. Her ballet flats slipped on the icy walkway. She caught herself on the porch railing, her other hand instinctively cradling her belly. The front door was locked. She tried the handle again. Again. She rang the door. Bing. The familiar chime echoed inside. Through the sidelight window, she watched Preston rise from the table. He walked toward the foyer. Her heart lifted. He was coming. He stopped at the thermostat, adjusted it, walked back to the dining room. The temperature on the garden thermometer read 23 degrees. Caroline circled the house. Every door, every window, locked, sealed. The garage code had been changed. When had he changed it? Why had he changed it? She returned to the dining room window. The brunette woman laughed at something Preston said. She touched his arm. The gesture was familiar, intimate, the gesture of a woman who had touched that arm many times before. The woman was wearing pearl earrings. Carolyn recognized them immediately. Preston had given them to her for their 5th anniversary. She had left them in her jewelry box this morning because they felt too formal for Thanksgiving dinner. Now another woman wore them in her house, at her table, with her husband. Carolyn's hands shook, not from the cold, from something deeper, from the slow, terrible recognition that this moment had been planned. She pounded on the glass again, harder this time. Preston glanced up. He said something to the woman. She turned and looked at Caroline through the window. Her expression held no surprise, no embarrassment, only a faint smile of satisfaction. Then Preston reached over and pulled the curtain closed. The world went dark. Carolyn stood there. Her reflection stared back at her from the black window. Mascara already smearing, lips turning blue. The face of a woman whose entire life had just shattered like ice on pavement. She fumbled for her phone, her coat pocket, empty. Her purse was inside. Her phone was inside. Her keys were inside. Everything she needed to survive was inside that house where her husband fed another woman Thanksgiving dinner. The baby kicked, hard, as if sensing her distress. "I need to move." The thought cut through the fog, I need to find help. The nearest neighbor was Helen Marsh, 71 years old, lived alone since her husband passed. Her house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, 200 yards away. Carolyn started walking. The cold wrapped around her like a shroud. Each breath burned her lungs. Her fingers had stopped hurting. That was bad. She remembered that from somewhere. When the pain stops, the real danger begins. 50 yards. The Mitchell house grew smaller behind her. The curtains remained closed. The warm light glowed mockingly through the fabric. 100 yards. Her legs felt heavy. The baby shifted, pressing against her bladder. Not now. Please, not now. 150 yards. She stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. Her knees hit the frozen ground. The impact jarred through her entire body. Get up, get up, get up. She pushed herself upright. Her palms left wet prints on the icy sidewalk that froze almost instantly. 200 yards. Helen's porch light glowed like a beacon. Caroline reached the steps, climbed them on hands and knees, pressed the doorbell. The door opened. Helen Marsh stood in a floral housecoat, her white hair in curlers. Her eyes went wide. Good Lord, Caroline, what happened to you? Caroline opened her mouth to answer. No words came out. Her teeth chattered too violently to form syllables. Helen pulled her inside. The warmth hit Caroline like a physical force. Her skin began to burn as sensation returned. Sit down right here. Helen guided her to the kitchen, wrapped blankets around her shoulders, put the kettle on. Her movements were quick and efficient. The movements of a woman who had raised 4 children and buried a husband and learned that in crisis, you act first and ask questions later. Carolyn sat at the kitchen table. The blanket scratched against her frozen skin. The feeling was slowly returning to her fingers. With it came the pain, thousands of tiny needles stabbing into her flesh. I'm calling 911 Helen said. Preston. The word came out, broken. He locked me out. Helen stopped. Her hand hovered over the phone. Your husband locked you out in this weather while you're 8 months pregnant. Carolyn nodded. The movement sent tears spilling down her cheeks. She had not realized she was crying. I saw. Through the window, there was a woman. She was wearing my earrings. She was sitting in my chair. Helen's face hardened. 67 years of life had taught her many things. She recognized this story. She had heard versions of it from friends, from neighbors, from her own sister 40 years ago. I'm calling 911, she repeated, and then we're going to talk about what happens next. Carolyn tried to respond, but a sudden pain ripped through her abdomen, different from the cold, different from the fear. This was something primal, something urgent. She looked down. A dark stain was spreading across her dress. The baby, she whispered. Something's wrong with the baby. Helen saw the stain. Her eyes went wide. Your water broke. Caroline, your water broke. It's too early. I'm not due for 3 more weeks. Babies come when babies come. Helen grabbed the phone. Her fingers moved with surprising speed. 911, yes. I need an ambulance at 1427 Maple Court. I have a pregnant woman, 8 months along. Her water just broke. She's been exposed to extreme cold for at least 15 minutes, maybe longer. Yes, I'll keep her warm. Please hurry. She hung up and knelt beside Carolyn. Help is coming. You just breathe. In and out. That's all you need to do right now. Caroline tried to focus on her breathing. In, out, but her mind kept returning to the image through that frost-covered window. Preston carving the turkey. The brunette woman laughing. The curtain closing. He left me outside to die. The thought arrived with crystalline clarity, not the melodrama of a betrayed wife, not the hysteria of pregnancy hormones. Simple, cold truth. He left me outside to die. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Carolyn gripped Helen's hand and held on for her life. The ambulance screamed through the night. Carolyn lay strapped to the gurney, an oxygen mask over her face. The paramedic beside her monitored the fetal heartbeat. His expression remained neutral, but his movements were urgent. Baby's heart rate is elevated but stable, he reported into his radio. Mother showing signs of moderate hypothermia. Contractions 4 minutes apart. 4 minutes, that was too fast. 3 weeks early, and contractions 4 minutes apart. Caroline knew enough about pregnancy to understand what that meant. Her baby was coming. Tonight, ready or not. The emergency room doors burst open. Bright lights assaulted her eyes. Voices overlapped. Hands transferred her from the ambulance gurney to a hospital bed. Carolyn Mitchell. She recognized that voice. She forced her eyes to focus. Denise Crawford stood over her. Her best friend since college. Her maid of honor. Now a nurse at this very hospital, still wearing her scrubs from an earlier shift. "I heard your name on the radio," Denise said. She gripped Caroline's hand. "What happened? Where's Preston?" Caroline tried to speak. A contraction ripped through her. She squeezed Denise's hand until her knuckles went white. "Breathe through it," Denise coached. "Just breathe. We'll talk after." Dr. Eleanor Vance appeared beside the bed, 52 years old, silver streaked through her dark hair. She had been Caroline's obstetrician through the entire pregnancy. Her presence brought a small measure of comfort. "Caroline, I'm going to examine you now. Your water broke early, and you've experienced significant physical stress. We need to assess how far along your labor has progressed." Carolyn nodded. The contraction faded. In its wake came exhaustion unlike anything she had ever known. The examination was quick but thorough. 6 centimeters dilated, Dr. Vance announced. "This baby is coming tonight. There's no stopping it now." "Is she okay?" Carolyn's voice cracked. "The cold. Did the cold hurt her?" "The fetal heartbeat is strong. Babies are resilient. But we'll monitor closely throughout the delivery." Another contraction. Caroline gripped the bed rails. The pain obliterated thought. When it passed, Denise was wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "I texted Samuel," Denise said. "Her husband, a firefighter, a good man. He's on his way to relieve me so I can stay with you." "Preston," Carolyn forced the word out. "Has anyone called Preston?" Denise's jaw tightened. "I tried his cell. No answer. I tried the house. No answer." "Of course not. He was busy. Entertaining." The contractions came faster. 7 centimeters, 8. The world narrowed to pain and breathing, and Denise's steady voice counting through each wave. Between contractions, Caroline's mind drifted. Memories surfaced unbidden. Preston at their first meeting. A charity gala for children's literacy. He had worn a perfectly tailored navy suit. His smile had made her feel like the only woman in the room. "I noticed you the moment you walked in," he had said. "I've been working up the courage to talk to you for an hour." She had laughed. A real estate developer worth millions, nervous about talking to an event planner. It seemed impossible. Romantic. Special. Their first date. A private dinner on his yacht. Champagne. Stars. His hand warm on hers. "I've never met anyone like you," he had whispered. "You make me want to be better." She had believed him. God help her, she had believed every word. The proposal. 6 months later. A 2-carat diamond. Tears in his eyes. "I'll spend every day making you feel safe," he had promised. "Every day for the rest of our lives." 9 centimeters. The wedding. 400 guests. Her mother crying. His mother inspecting the flower arrangements with barely concealed disapproval. Their first anniversary. Second. Third. The subtle changes she had ignored. The late nights at the office. The business trips that grew longer and more frequent. The way he would look at his phone and smile at something she could not see. "You're being paranoid," he would say whenever she asked. "I married you, didn't I? What more proof do you need?" 10 centimeters. "Time to push," Dr. Vance said. Carolyn pushed. Through the pain, through the memories, through the shattered remnants of everything she thought she knew about her life. At 11:47 p.m. on Thanksgiving night, Grace Mitchell entered the world. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, 10 fingers, 10 toes. A lusty cry that echoed off the delivery room walls. The nurse placed her on Caroline's chest. Warm, soft, perfect. "Hello, Grace." Caroline's voice broke. Tears streamed down her face. "Hello, my beautiful girl." For this one moment, nothing else existed. Not Preston, not the betrayal, not the cold that had nearly killed them both. Just this tiny human, this miracle. I'm going to protect you, Carolyn whispered against her daughter's downy hair. I promise, whatever it takes, I'm going to protect you. Denise wiped her own eyes. Dr. Vance smiled. The nurses moved efficiently around them, completing post-delivery procedures. Then the door opened. Preston stood in the entrance. His overcoat still carried snowflakes. His cheeks were flushed from the cold. Behind him stood his mother, Margaret, in her signature Chanel jacket, and a man in a three-piece suit carrying a leather briefcase. Preston's eyes swept the room. They landed on the baby. His expression shifted. Something calculated moved behind his gaze. Thank God you're both safe, he said. His voice carried just the right note of relief. When I saw the ambulance pull up at Mrs. Marsh's house, I rushed straight here. Carolyn stared at him. This man she had married. This man who had left her to freeze while he fed his mistress Thanksgiving dinner. He stood there now playing the concerned husband, and part of her almost believed it. That was how good he was. That was how long she had been trained to doubt herself. We need to discuss custody arrangements, the man with the briefcase said. His tone was businesslike, detached. Given the circumstances of this evening. Circumstances? The word escaped Caroline before she could stop it. Your obvious mental instability, Preston said. He shook his head sadly. Locking yourself out on the coldest night of the year, 8 months pregnant, and then making wild accusations about affairs and conspiracies. Margaret nodded, her face arranged in an expression of maternal concern. We've been worried about her for months, Margaret said. The pregnancy hormones have made her erratic, paranoid. We think it might be best if the baby stays with Preston while Caroline gets the help she needs. Caroline's arms tightened around Grace. The baby stirred, sensing her mother's distress. I didn't lock myself out. Her voice shook. He locked me out. He changed the garage code. He closed the curtains while I pounded on the window. Preston sighed, the sound of a patient man dealing with an unreasonable woman. Sweetheart, you know that's not what happened. You've been under so much stress. It's affecting your memory. Gaslighting. The words surfaced from somewhere deep in Caroline's mind. She had read about it once, the way abusers made their victims question reality, the way they rewrote history until up was down and truth was lies. I know what I saw. Her voice grew stronger. There was a woman in our house, a brunette. She was wearing my pearl earrings. Victoria from my office stopped by to drop off some documents, Preston said smoothly. I invited her to stay for dinner since she was alone on the holiday. There's nothing sinister about basic hospitality. Victoria. He had not even bothered to remember the lie. The woman's name was Veronica. Carolyn had heard it somewhere. At a company party, maybe. Preston's executive assistant. Her name is Veronica, Carolyn said. Preston's smile flickered. Just for a second. So brief that anyone else might have missed it. Victoria, Veronica, what difference does it make? The point is that you've constructed this paranoid fantasy, and now you're trying to use our newborn daughter as a weapon. The lawyer stepped forward. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Robert Thorne. I represent the Mitchell family. Given your concerning behavior tonight, we believe it's in the child's best interest to— No. The voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Helen Marsh stood there, leaning on her cane. Her white hair was still in curlers. Her floral housecoat had been replaced by a heavy winter coat. Her eyes blazed with righteous fury. I saw everything, Helen declared. I saw that poor girl pounding on that window for dear life. I saw you, Mr. Mitchell. Look right at her through the glass. I saw you turn away and close the curtains. I saw you leave your pregnant wife to freeze while you sat down to dinner with another woman. Preston's composure cracked. His jaw tightened. Mrs. Marsh, you're confused. It was dark. You couldn't possibly have seen— I have it on my doorbell camera. Helen's voice cut like ice. The whole thing time-stamped. Crystal clear. Would you like me to play it for the room? Silence fell over the hospital room. Heavy, absolute. Caroline looked at Preston, really looked at him. For the first time in 6 years, she saw him clearly. The mask had slipped. Behind it was something cold, something calculating, something that had never loved her at all. I'm not crazy, she said. The words emerged as statements, not questions, not pleas. Facts. I know what I saw. I know what you did. Preston's eyes met hers. In them, she saw the truth. He had been caught, and he would never forgive her for it. The lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue this conversation at a later time. Perhaps you should, Helen said. She moved to Caroline's bedside and took her hand. This woman just gave birth after nearly dying from hypothermia. Whatever games you people wanted to play, you can play them in elsewhere. Margaret Mitchell gathered her dignity like a shield. This isn't over, she said to Caroline. That baby is a Mitchell. She belongs with her family. I'm her family, Caroline replied. I'm her mother. Preston turned and walked out without another word. His mother followed. The lawyer lingered for a moment, studying Caroline with an expression she could not read. Then he too was gone. Denise exhaled shakily. What the hell was that? Carolyn looked down at Grace. Her daughter had fallen asleep on her chest, peaceful, oblivious to the storm swirling around her. That, Carolyn said quietly, was the beginning of war. 3 days later, Caroline sat in a wheelchair in the hospital lobby. Grace slept in the car seat beside her. The discharge papers were signed. The medical bills would come later. She had nowhere to go. Denise appeared through the automatic doors. She had taken the day off work. Behind her came Samuel, tall and broad-shouldered, carrying a bag from the hospital gift shop. The car's warm, Denise said. Samuel installed the car seat base this morning, triple-checked it. Carolyn nodded. She could not speak past the lump in her throat. The house on Maple Court was in Preston's name. The Mercedes she had driven was in Preston's name. The bank accounts they shared had been quietly emptied. She had discovered that yesterday when the hospital cafeteria declined her credit card. Everything she owned, everything she had helped build over 6 years of marriage, gone in the time it took to lock a door. Samuel loaded the wheelchair into the trunk while Denise helped Caroline into the back seat beside Grace's car seat. You're staying with us, Denise said. It was not a question. The guest room is small, but it's warm and safe. You stay as long as you need. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling. Denise squeezed her hand. You've been there for me through everything. Through my mother's cancer. Through the miscarriage we don't talk about. Through all of it. This is what friends do. The drive to Denise and Samuel's house took 20 minutes. A small craftsman in a working-class neighborhood. Nothing like the Mitchell estate with its columns and chandeliers. But when Caroline stepped through the front door, she felt something she had not felt in years. Safe. She felt safe. The guest room was tiny, a full-size bed with a handmade quilt, a dresser that had seen better days. Samuel had assembled a portable crib in the corner. A package of newborn diapers sat on the dresser with a bow. It's not much, Denise said apologetically. It's everything. Caroline's voice broke. It's more than I deserve. Stop that. Denise gripped her shoulders. None of this is your fault. You hear me. None of it. Caroline wanted to believe her, but the voice in her head, Preston's voice, whispered otherwise. You should have seen the signs. You were naive. You were stupid. You let this happen. That first night she could not sleep. Grace dozed in the portable crib, her tiny chest rising and falling. Caroline sat in the worn armchair by the window and stared out at the snow-covered yard. Memories flooded in, uninvited, relentless. Their honeymoon in Bali, Preston rubbing sunscreen on her shoulders, laughing when she burned anyway. The first time he told her he loved her. 3 months into dating, in the middle of a crowded restaurant, not caring who heard. Moving into the house on Maple Court. Her house, she had thought. Their house. Preston carrying her over the threshold like they were newlyweds even though they had been married for months by then. Decorating the nursery together, arguing about paint colors, pink or yellow. They had compromised on a soft lavender. Preston's hand on her belly the first time Grace kicked. The wonder in his eyes. The whispered promises to their unborn daughter. Had any of it been real? Had he ever loved her at all? Or had she been a prop in some elaborate performance, a supporting character in the story of his life? The questions circled like vultures, picking at the bones of her certainty until nothing remained but doubt. At 2 in the morning, Carolyn opened Preston's old laptop. He had given it to her 3 years ago when he upgraded. She had barely used it, kept it in a drawer as a backup. The password was his usual. His mother's maiden name plus the year he made his first million. He had never thought she would need to access it, never imagined she would have reason to. His email synced automatically. 3 years of messages loaded onto the screen. Caroline's hands trembled as she began to read. The affair had not started 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, or even 1 year ago. The emails to Veronica Hale began 4 years before their wedding, before they were even engaged. Can't wait to see you tonight, one message read, dated 2 weeks before Preston's proposal. Wear that red dress I love. Miss you already, another said, sent from their honeymoon in Bali. This trip can't end soon enough. She doesn't suspect anything, Preston had written 6 months into their marriage. She's too trusting. Almost feel bad, almost. Carolyn read on. Each email was a knife. Each casual reference to their deception twisted the blade deeper. Veronica had not been a recent mistake. She was not the result of a midlife crisis or a moment of weakness. She was a constant, a parallel relationship that had run alongside Caroline's marriage from the very beginning. Every memory was poisoned now, every tender moment recast in shadow. While Preston had whispered promises to Carolyn, he had been texting his mistress. While they had danced at their wedding, he had been counting the hours until he could return to Veronica's bed. Grace stirred in her crib, a small whimper that broke the silence. Caroline closed the laptop. She crossed to the crib and lifted her daughter, held her close, let the tears fall silently into the darkness. I'm sorry, she whispered to Grace. I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from who he is. The baby nestled against her chest, warm, trusting, innocent of the ugliness that surrounded them both. Caroline sat in the rocking chair Denise had found at a yard sale. She rocked her daughter and stared at the snow falling outside the window. The same snow that had nearly killed them both 3 nights ago. But they were alive. They were together. And somewhere in the wreckage of her marriage, there had to be a path forward. She just had to find it. A week passed, then 2. Carolyn existed in a haze of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. Grace had colic. She cried for hours at a stretch, inconsolable despite Caroline's best efforts. At 3 a.m, Caroline walked the floor of the guest room, bouncing, shushing, crying silently herself so she would not wake Denise and Samuel. The doubt crept in during these dark hours. Maybe she was not cut out for motherhood. Maybe Preston was right that she was unstable. Maybe Grace would be better off with him. No, she shook the thoughts away. That was his voice in her head. His gaslighting had seeped so deep that she could not always tell where his manipulation ended and her own thoughts began. On night 14, Grace finally fell asleep at 2 a.m. Caroline did not dare move. She sat frozen in the rocking chair, barely breathing, terrified that any movement would restart the crying. Her phone glowed on the nightstand. She picked it up carefully, one-handed, moving in slow motion. The browser opened. Her thumbs moved without conscious direction. Signs of narcissistic abuse. Gaslighting definition. Am I a bad mother? How to survive divorce with newborn. The search results blurred through her tears, but the information sank in, word by word, concept by concept. A framework for understanding what had happened to her. Narcissistic personality disorder, characterized by grandiosity, lack of empathy, and need for admiration. Narcissists do not love their partners. They acquire them, use them, discard them when they are no longer useful. Love bombing, the initial phase of overwhelming attention and affection, designed to create attachment and dependency. Preston's whirlwind courtship had not been romance. It had been strategy, devaluation. Once the target is secured, the narcissist begins to undermine their confidence. Subtle criticisms, moving the goalposts, making the target feel that they can never be good enough. Discard. When the target is depleted or a new source of supply emerges, the narcissist which throws them away, often cruelly, often publicly. Caroline read until dawn. Each article was a mirror. Each description matched her experience with uncanny precision. She was not crazy. She was not paranoid. She had been the victim of a textbook psychological abuse pattern. The knowledge did not ease the pain, but it gave the pain a name, and that was a start. Later that morning, while Grace napped and Denise was at work, Caroline returned to Preston's laptop. This time she searched with purpose. Bank statements. Preston had separate accounts she had never known about. Offshore holdings in the Cayman Islands. A shell company that seemed to exist solely to hide assets. Real estate documents. The house on Maple Court was not just in Preston's name. It was held by a trust that predated their marriage. She had never owned a single brick of it. And then she found the insurance policy. $2 million. On her life. Taken out 6 months ago. Listed as a corporate asset of Mitchell Development LLC. She was the sole beneficiary of a policy she had never signed and never seen. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the laptop. There was more. A text message thread between Preston and Veronica that had backed up to the cloud. Just need to wait for the baby, Preston had written 3 months ago. After that, accidents happen in winter. Are you serious? Veronica had replied. Insurance pays out in full if it looks natural. Frozen lakes, icy roads, plenty of options. That's cold, even for you. Ha, cold. Good one. Carolyn stared at the screen. The words swam before her eyes. He had not just wanted to leave her. He had planned to kill her. The Thanksgiving incident had not been spontaneous cruelty. It had been an attempt. A failed one, thanks to Helen Marsh and her doorbell camera, but an attempt nonetheless. Her chest tightened. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. The room spun. Panic attack. She recognized the symptoms, had never experienced one before, gripped the edge of the desk and forced herself to breathe. In, 2, 3, 4, out. 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, out. 2, 3, 4. Slowly the world stabilized. Her heart rate settled. The spinning stopped. She screenshotted everything. Every email, every bank statement, every text message. Sent them to herself, to Denise, to a new email address that Preston did not know about. Then she did something she had never done in 6 years of marriage. She called a lawyer. Her own lawyer. Not the family attorney who worked for the Mitchells. Not someone Preston could buy or intimidate. A woman Denise's brother had recommended. A shark in sensible heels named Diana Cross. I need help, Caroline said when the receptionist answered. My husband tried to kill me, and I have proof. Diana Cross's office occupied the top floor of a modest building downtown. No mahogany, no chandeliers, just clean lines and good lighting in the sense that serious work happened here. Diana herself was in her late 40s, sharp eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses, a handshake firm enough to bruise. Tell me everything, she said once Caroline was seated. Start from the beginning, don't leave anything out. Carolyn talked for 2 hours. The courtship, the wedding, the subtle signs she had ignored, the Thanksgiving incident, the laptop discoveries, the insurance policy, the text messages. Diana listened without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad. Her expression remained neutral throughout. When Caroline finished, Diana set down her pen. This isn't just divorce material, she said carefully. This could be criminal. I know. If we pursue this, it will get ugly. Preston has money, resources, connections. He'll hire the best lawyers, spin the narrative, make you look like the crazy ex-wife. He already is. Caroline pulled out her phone and showed Diana the article that had appeared in the local society pages. Preston Mitchell in the Challenges of Loving Too Much. A sympathetic profile of a devoted husband dealing with his wife's mental health struggles. Diana read the article. Her jaw tightened. He's good, I'll give him that. He's had practice. Carolyn hesitated. Then she showed Diana the other things she had found, buried deep in the laptop files. A settlement agreement from 8 years ago, sealed by court order. Preston's first wife, a woman named Suzanne. Diana's eyes widened. He was married before. The settlement was $3 million, conditional on her silence. The agreement references physical and emotional harm, but doesn't go into details. How did you find this? Bobby Thorne's initials are on the document. He's been the Mitchell family lawyer for 20 years. He handled everything. Diana sat back in her chair. Her mind was clearly working through implications. If we could get Thorne to talk, everything changes, but attorneys have privilege and loyalty. Breaking either would end his career. I know, Carolyn said. That's why I need something else first. I need to find Suzanne. The search took 3 days. Suzanne Parker had reverted to her maiden name after the divorce. She lived in Connecticut now, remarried, 2 children, a quiet life far from the Mitchell orbit. Carolyn found her on social media. A brief message, no details, just a request to talk. Suzanne responded within an hour. I've been waiting 8 years for someone to reach out, her message said. Tell me when and where. They met at a coffee shop halfway between their homes. Neutral territory, public space. Carolyn left Grace with Denise and made the 2-hour drive alone. Suzanne was already seated when Caroline arrived. 42 years old, still beautiful, but in a weathered way, like someone who had survived a storm and carried the memory in her bones. You're pregnant, Suzanne said, then corrected herself. We're pregnant recently. 3 weeks ago, Carolyn sat down. A little girl, Grace. Suzanne's expression softened. Congratulations. And I'm sorry, both things at once, thank you. They studied each other across the table. 2 women who had nothing in common except the man who had damaged them both. He was charming at first, Suzanne said quietly. They always are, flowers, compliments, making me feel like the center of the universe. Carolyn nodded. Love bombing. You've done your research. Suzanne smiled grimly. It took me years to learn those words. Years after I'd already lived through it. What happened? With you? Suzanne looked down at her coffee. Steam curled upward between them. The usual progression, honeymoon phase, then criticism, control, isolation. He cut me off from my friends, my family, made me dependent on him for everything. And then he got bored. Suzanne's voice hardened. Found someone new, a younger model, wanted me gone but didn't want the scandal of a divorce, so he tried to make me leave on my own, made my life miserable. When that didn't work, he got creative. Creative how? Suzanne looked up. Her eyes held depths of pain that Carolyn recognized. There was an accident, a car accident, black ice on a country road. My brakes failed at exactly the wrong moment. Caroline's blood ran cold. He tampered with your car. I could never prove it. The mechanics said it was wear and tear. But I knew the timing was too perfect. The week before, he'd taken out a life insurance policy on me. $2 million. The same amount. The exact same amount. His signature move, Carolyn whispered. I confronted him, told him I knew what he'd done. He laughed, said no one would believe me, said I was paranoid, unstable. Suzanne's hands tightened around her coffee cup. Then he offered me $3 million to disappear, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and never speak of it again. And you took it. I was terrified. I thought if I stayed, he'd try again, and next time he'd succeed. Suzanne's voice cracked. So I ran, took the money and ran, and I've been living with that shame ever since. Carolyn reached it across the table, took Suzanne's hand. You did what you had to do to survive. There's no shame in that. But there is, because I knew what he was, and I said nothing, which means every woman after me, every woman he hurt. Suzanne's eyes filled with tears. That's on me. No, Caroline said firmly, that's on him. Only on him. They talked for 3 more hours. Suzanne provided names, dates, details that corroborated the pattern. Other women Preston had dated between marriages. A secretary who had quit suddenly and moved across the country. A business partner's wife who had filed for divorce under mysterious circumstances. He's been doing this his whole life, Suzanne said. His father was the same way. Margaret looked the other way then, and she's looking the other way now. The whole family's rotten. When they finally parted, Suzanne hugged Caroline tight. Burn him to the ground, she whispered. For both of us. Caroline drove home as the sun set. Her mind churned with everything she had learned. Preston was not an anomaly. He was a product, a legacy of abuse passed down through generations. And she was just the latest in a long line of victims. But she was going to be the last. Her phone buzzed as she pulled into Denise's driveway. An unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then something made her answer. Mrs. Mitchell. The voice was female, shaky, familiar somehow. Yes. This is Veronica. Veronica Hale. I need to talk to you tonight. Please. He hit me. Carolyn sat in the darkness of the car. The engine ticked as it cooled. Snow began to fall. The woman who had eaten Thanksgiving dinner in her seat. The woman who had worn her pearl earrings. The woman who had helped Preston try to kill her. "Where are you?" Carolyn asked. "A motel. The one off exit 12, room 14. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up before she could change her mind. The motel was exactly what Caroline expected. Flickering neon sign, peeling paint, the kind of place where people went when they had nowhere else to go. She found room 14 at the end of the row, knocked twice. The door opened. Veronica Hale stood in the gap. Her left eye was swollen shut. Her lip was split. Mascara tracked down her cheeks like war paint. "You came." Her voice was thick with tears. "I didn't think you would." "Neither did I." Carolyn stepped inside. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and despair. A single lamp cast shadows across water-stained walls. Veronica sank onto the edge of the bed. She looked smaller than Caroline remembered. Diminished. The confident woman who had sat in her chair on Thanksgiving night had been replaced by someone fragile and afraid. "He found out I copied some files," Veronica said. "Documents, bank records, things I thought might be useful someday." "Insurance against." She laughed bitterly. "Insurance, that's ironic, isn't it? Isn't it? What kind of files?" "And everything. Offshore accounts, shell companies, the trust fund set up." Veronica looked up. "And the insurance policies. Yours and mine." Caroline's breath caught. "He has one on you, too." "Took it out 2 months ago. Right after you announced your pregnancy. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I was so stupid." "You're not stupid. You were manipulated, same as me." Veronica shook her head. "It's not the same. I knew what he was. I knew he was married. I helped him deceive you." Her voice broke. "I told myself I was special, that he loved me, that you were just a placeholder until he could be with me properly. That's what he wanted you to believe. I know that now." Veronica reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. "This is everything I copied. Bank accounts, emails, the insurance policies, and something else. A settlement agreement from years ago. Another wife. Suzanne something. Suzanne Parker. I already know about her." Veronica's eyes widened. "You've been busy." "I've had to be." Caroline took the flash drive, turned it over in her hands. "Why are you giving this to me? After everything?" Veronica was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Because I looked in the mirror tonight, after he hit me, and I didn't recognize the person looking back." She touched her swollen eye. "I've become someone I hate, someone my mother would be ashamed of, and the only way to fix it is to stop him. Even if it means going to prison yourself. You're complicit in fraud. Maybe worse." "I know." Veronica straightened. Some of the steel returned to her spine. "But I'd rather face that than spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when he'll decide I'm more useful dead than alive." Carolyn studied the woman before her. 3 weeks ago, she would have wanted Veronica destroyed, would have taken pleasure in her suffering. But sitting in this dingy motel room, looking at another victim of the same predator, she felt something unexpected. Recognition. Understanding. The beginning of something that might someday become forgiveness. "Come with me," Caroline said. "What?" "To my lawyer tomorrow morning. We'll go together, give her everything." Veronica stared at her. "Why would you help me? I ruined your marriage." "No." Caroline shook her head. "He ruined my marriage. You were just another tool he used. Same as me, same as Suzanne, same as whoever came before her." She stood. "We can keep being his victims, or we can work together to make sure he never hurts anyone else." Veronica's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry for everything." Carolyn did not embrace her, did not offer comfort. Some wounds were too fresh for that, but she also did not leave. "Sorry doesn't fix anything," she said quietly, "but helping take him down might be a start." The next morning, they sat in Diana Cross's office. Caroline, Veronica, Diana. the flash drive between them like a grenade. Diana reviewed the contents for an hour. Her expression grew more serious with each file. "This is extensive," she finally said. "Fraud, tax evasion, insurance fraud, and if we can connect the dots, possibly attempted murder." "Twice," Carolyn said, "Suzanne's car accident, and Thanksgiving night. We need more. Testimony from Suzanne, documentation from inside the company, and ideally someone close to the family who can corroborate the pattern." "Bobby Thorne," Carolyn said. "He's handled all of it. The settlements, the trusts, everything. Thorne is their family attorney. He'll never talk. He might, if he realizes he's also exposed." Carolyn thought of the settlement documents she had found, Thorne's initials on every page. He's not just a lawyer, he's a participant, and participants can become witnesses. Diana nodded slowly. "Let me do some digging. Find out where Thorne's vulnerabilities are." They spent 3 more hours building their case. Timelines, connections, the web of deceit that Preston had spun over decades. By the end, Diana had filled an entire legal pad with notes. "This will take time," she warned. "Months, possibly. And Preston won't go quietly. He'll fight with everything he has." "I know," Carolyn said, "but I have something he doesn't." "What's that?" Carolyn thought of Grace, of Suzanne, of Veronica with her swollen eye and flash drive full of secrets. "I have nothing left to lose." 6 weeks after Grace's birth, 42 days of sleepless nights and endless worry and legal consultations that drained what little money Carolyn had left. She sat in the darkness of Denise's guest room. 3 in the morning. Grace had finally fallen asleep after 4 hours of crying. The colic was relentless, the exhaustion bone deep. The custody papers had arrived that afternoon. Preston was seeking full custody of Grace. His lawyers had compiled a devastating portrait of Caroline's alleged instability. Psychiatric evaluations demanded. Character witnesses lined up. The full weight of Mitchell family money deployed to paint her as an unfit mother. Given the mother's documented history of paranoid delusions and erratic behavior, we believe the child's best interests are served by a placement with her father. Paranoid delusions, her own words, twisted. The accusations she had made about the Thanksgiving incident reframed as symptoms of mental illness. Multiple witnesses attest to Mrs. Mitchell's emotional volatility and inability to provide stable care. Multiple witnesses, his mother, his employees, people who owed their livelihoods to him, people who would say whatever he told them to say. We request emergency temporary custody pending a full psychological evaluation of the mother. Emergency temporary custody. They wanted to take Grace from her. Not later. Now. Carolyn read the filing again, and again, and again. Each word was a blade. By the third reading, she could barely see through her tears. Maybe they're right. The thought arrived unbidden, insidious. In Preston's voice, "Maybe you are unstable. Look at yourself, living in someone else's guest room. No job, no money, no family except a newborn who cries for hours and a friend who has to be exhausted from carrying you." She looked at her reflection in the dark window. Hollow eyes, unwashed hair. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a full meal. Maybe Grace would be better off with him. No, that was the gaslighting talking, the programming he had installed over 6 years of marriage. She knew what he was. She had the evidence. She had witnesses. She had the truth. But what if the truth was not enough? She walked to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the cold tile floor with her back against the tub. The face in the mirror looked like a stranger. Someone defeated. Someone lost. "Maybe they're right," she whispered to her reflection. "Maybe I am crazy." The words hung in the air. Terrible. Tempting. The easy way out. Just give up. Give in. Let him win. Stop fighting. Then she heard Grace cry. The sound cut through the fog. Her daughter. Her baby. The innocent life that depended on her completely. Carolyn pushed herself up, walked back to the bedroom, lifted Grace from her crib. "I'm here," she murmured. "Mama's here." Grace's crying eased. She nestled against Caroline's chest. Her tiny heart beat against Caroline's own. And in that moment, something shifted. No, the word rose from somewhere deep, somewhere that Preston's manipulation had not reached. No, I will not let him win. She looked at her reflection in the window again. This time she did not see a victim. She saw a mother, a survivor, a woman who had been knocked down but was not yet defeated. I know what happened, she said aloud. To the mirror, to Preston's voice in her head, to every doubt and fear that had plagued her for weeks. I know who I am. His lies don't define me. Grace gurgled, almost like agreement. Caroline smiled, the first real smile in weeks. You and me against the world, baby girl. That's not so bad, is it? She sat in the rocking chair and held her daughter and watched the snow fall outside the window. The same snow that had nearly killed them both. But they had survived, and they would keep surviving. The fight was not over, but Carolyn was ready for it now. Diana Cross called on a Tuesday morning. We found our opening, she said. Bobby Thorne, his daughter's college tuition was paid by Mitchell Development. Unreported income. If we bring that to the Bar Association, he loses his license. You want to blackmail him? I prefer to call it providing motivation. Diana's voice held no apology. Preston has been blackmailing people for years. It's time someone used his own tactics against him. That afternoon, Caroline found Bobby Thorne at his daughter's soccer game. Just as Diana had suggested, neutral territory, public space, harder for him to run. He was sitting alone in the bleachers, 65 years old, silver hair, the kind of distinguished face that appeared on law firm websites alongside words like integrity and excellence. Carolyn sat down beside him. Mr. Thorne, he glanced at her. Recognition flickered. His expression closed. Mrs. Mitchell, you shouldn't be here. I need 5 minutes. Whatever you want to say it to your lawyer. I can't. I know about the tuition payments. I know about Suzanne's settlement. I know about the insurance policies. Carolyn kept her voice low, steady. I know what you've helped him do for 20 years. Thorne's face aged 10 years and 10 seconds. If you're trying to threaten me, I'm trying to give you a choice. Carolyn pulled out her phone, showed him the screenshots, the documents, the evidence trail that led directly to his door. I can take this to the Bar Association, to the FBI, to the press. You'll lose your license, your reputation, everything you've built. Thorne stared at the screen. His hands trembled. Or you help me stop him. Come forward. Tell the truth. The evidence against Preston is overwhelming. If you cooperate, you might walk away with your license intact. He'll destroy me. He's going to destroy you anyway. Carolyn leaned closer. It's only a matter of time before he needs a scapegoat. Someone to take the fall when the house of cards collapses. Do you really think it won't be you? Thorne was silent for a long moment. On the field below, his daughter scored a goal. The crowd cheered. He did not seem to notice. 20 years, he finally said. I've kept their secrets for 20 years. His father's, his, Margaret's, all of it. Then you know better than anyone what they're capable of. Thorne looked at the soccer field, his daughter celebrating with her teammates, a life built on money that came from protecting monsters. If I talk, I lose everything. If you don't talk, he does this again, to someone else's daughter. Carolyn followed his gaze to the field. Maybe yours someday. The words landed. She saw it in the way his shoulders slumped, the way his jaw tightened. The moment he realized there was no good option, only less bad ones. I need time, he said, to think. You have 48 hours. After that, I go to the FBI anyway. She stood to leave, stopped. For what it's worth, I don't think you're evil. I think you made choices that seemed small at the time, and then you couldn't find your way back. But there's still time. You can still choose who you want to be. She walked away without looking back. 46 hours later, a box arrived at Diana Cross's office. 20 years of Mitchell family secrets. Offshore accounts, hidden assets, payoffs to previous victims, evidence of fraud that Preston's own father had started and Preston had expanded. And Margaret Mitchell's name was on half the documents. Diana reviewed the contents for 3 days. Then she called Caroline. We have him. We have all of them. The custody hearing was in 2 weeks. But now it would be about much more than custody. It would be about justice. The courthouse stood like a monument to justice at the center of downtown. Gray stone walls, marble columns, the kind of building designed to make people feel small, to remind them that the law was bigger than any individual grievance. Carolyn had driven past this building hundreds of times without ever really seeing it. Now she stood on its steps, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You ready for this?" Diana Cross stood beside her, briefcase in hand, game face on. The attorney had transformed over the past weeks from hired counsel to something closer to a partner in war. "No," Carolyn admitted, "but I'm going in anyway." That's the spirit. They climbed the steps together through the metal detectors, past the security guards, down marble hallways that echoed with footsteps and whispered conversations. The courtroom was at the end of the hall. Room 417. Family court. Though what was about to happen would stretch far beyond family matters. Carolyn paused outside the heavy wooden doors. She thought of Grace, safe with Denise in a waiting room downstairs, too young to witness what was about to unfold, too innocent to understand that her father was about to be exposed as a monster. She thought of Suzanne watching from Connecticut, unable to be here in person, but following every development. She thought of Veronica, hidden away in a safe house, ready to testify via video link. She thought of Bobby Thorne, who had finally chosen conscience over complicity. All of them, all their pain, all their secrets. It had all led to this moment. Carolyn pushed open the doors and stepped inside. The courtroom was packed. She had not expected that. But the Mitchell name still carried weight in this town, and scandals involving millionaires drew crowds like honey drew flies. Society reporters sat in the back row, notebooks ready. Former business associates filled the middle rows, curiosity and schadenfreude written on their faces. A few people she recognized from charity events and country club functions. People who had smiled at her for years while knowing nothing about her. People who had probably whispered behind her back when the rumors started. Let them watch, she thought. Let them see everything. She walked down the center aisle. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. Each step felt like a countdown, like the final approach to something that could not be undone. The plaintiff's table waited on the left side of the courtroom. Diana was already there, arranging documents. A paralegal sat beside her, laptop open, ready to display evidence on the courtroom's projection screen. Caroline took her seat. She folded her hands on the table. She did not look at the defendant's table on the right side of the room. Not yet. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations. The energy was electric. Everyone knew something significant was about to happen. The pre-trial motions had been sealed. The evidence list had been kept confidential, but rumors had leaked anyway. They always did. The side door opened. Preston entered. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His tie was deep burgundy. His hair was perfectly styled. His posture was immaculate. He looked like a man attending a business meeting, not a man facing criminal exposure and the potential loss of his child. Two attorneys flanked him. William Hartley, the lead counsel, was a silver-haired man with a reputation for destroying opposing witnesses. Marcus Webb, the second chair, was younger but no less ruthless. Together, they had won cases that should have been unwinnable. They had made guilty men walk free and innocent women look like liars. Preston took his seat at the defendant's table. Only then did he allow himself to look at Caroline Bonconchegron. Their eyes met. He smiled. That familiar smile. The one that had made her feel special once. The one that had convinced her she was the center of his universe. Now she saw it for what it was. A weapon, a tool of manipulation, a mask covering something cold and calculating. She did not look away, did not flinch, did not give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. I know what you are now, she thought, and everyone else is about to know too. Margaret Mitchell entered through the main doors, 67 years old, pearls at her throat, Chanel jacket buttoned precisely. She walked with the bearing of a woman who had never been denied anything in her life. She did not look at Caroline as she passed, did not acknowledge her existence, simply took her seat in the front row behind her son, as if the woman who had nearly died carrying her grandchild was beneath notice. Carolyn felt the old shame rising, the old inadequacy, the voice that whispered she would never be good enough for these people. Then she remembered Grace, her daughter, her reason for fighting. The shame receded. Determination took its place. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. All rise. The Honorable Judge Thomas Whitmore presiding. Everyone stood. The judge entered through a door behind the bench. 60 years old, gray beard, rimless glasses, a reputation for fairness and an intolerance for courtroom theatrics. Be seated. The courtroom settled. Papers rustled. Someone coughed. Judge Whitmore reviewed documents on his bench for a long moment. The silence stretched. Finally, he looked up. We are here today in the matter of Mitchell versus Mitchell, case number 2024-7432. This is a custody hearing regarding the minor child Grace Elizabeth Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell is seeking full custody. Mr. Mitchell has filed a counter petition for full custody, citing concerns about the mother's mental stability. The judge paused. His eyes moved between the two tables. I have reviewed the preliminary filings from both parties. I understand there may be additional evidence to be presented today. Mr. Hartley, you may proceed with your opening statement. William Hartley rose with practiced ease. He buttoned his jacket, adjusted his cuffs. Every movement was calculated to project confidence and authority. Thank you, Your Honor. He moved to stand before the bench, positioning himself so the jury box, empty in this hearing, but the habit remained, would have had a clear view. Your Honor, this case is fundamentally simple. It is about a devoted father who wants what is best for his daughter. And it is about a mother whose erratic behavior has repeatedly demonstrated her inability to provide stable care. Caroline felt Diana's hand on her arm. Steady, reassuring. Stay calm, the touch said. Let him talk. Your moment will come. On Thanksgiving evening of last year, Mrs. Mitchell endangered her own life and the life of her unborn child through a series of poor decisions. She went outside in freezing temperatures wearing inappropriate clothing. She failed to bring her phone or keys. She then compounded these errors by wandering through the neighborhood instead of seeking immediate shelter. Carolyn's jaw tightened. The lies flowed so smoothly, so confidently, as if repetition could make them true. Mr. Mitchell, upon discovering his wife missing, immediately called emergency services and rushed to find her. He was not, as Mrs. Mitchell has alleged, deliberately ignoring her distress. He was inside the home, unaware of the situation, until the ambulance arrived. The courtroom was silent. Hartley had the room's attention. In the weeks since, Mrs. Mitchell has engaged in a systematic campaign to destroy her husband's reputation. She has made wild accusations of attempted murder. She has allegedly obtained confidential documents through illegal means. She has recruited disgruntled former employees to support her narrative. Hartley paused for effect. This is not the behavior of a stable parent. This is the behavior of a woman consumed by paranoia and vindictiveness. A woman who would rather destroy her child's father than accept the end of her marriage gracefully. He returned to his seat. We asked the court to grant full custody to Mr. Mitchell, with supervised visitation for the mother pending a complete psychological evaluation. Thank you. Judge Whitmore made a note. Ms. Cross, your opening statement. Diana rose. She did not move from behind the table, did not perform, simply spoke. Your Honor, opposing counsel has presented a compelling narrative. Unfortunately, it is entirely fiction. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's gavel came down once. Quiet, Diana continued. Mrs. Mitchell did not lock herself out on Thanksgiving evening. She was locked out, deliberately, by her husband. While she pounded on windows and doors, Mr. Mitchell sat inside eating dinner with another woman. He made eye contact with his pregnant wife through the glass and chose to close the curtains. Preston's expression did not change, but Caroline saw his hands tighten on the table edge. We have video evidence of this. We have testimony from the neighbor who rescued Mrs. Mitchell. We have documentation of a $2 million life insurance policy that Mr. Mitchell took out on his wife 6 months before the incident. The murmur grew louder. The gavel came down again. We also have text messages in which Mr. Mitchell discusses his wife's death as a desirable outcome. Quote, just need to wait for the baby. After that, accidents happen in winter. End quote. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Spectators whispered to each other. Margaret Mitchell's composure cracked for the first time, her face going pale. Judge Whitmore banged his gavel repeatedly. Order. I will have order in this courtroom. The noise subsided reluctantly. Ms. Cross, these are serious allegations. Yes, Your Honor, and we are prepared to prove every one of them. The judge studied her for a long moment. Very well. You may call your first witness. Diana nodded to the paralegal, the projection screen lowered from the ceiling. Your Honor, we would like to begin by presenting video evidence. This footage was recorded by a doorbell camera at the residence of Helen Marsh, who lives at the end of the cul-de-sac where the Mitchell home is located. The screen flickered to life. The image was clear despite the darkness. Carolyn's figure was visible, illuminated by the porch lights of the Mitchell home. She was pounding on the dining room window. Her breath came out in visible clouds. Her thin cardigan offered no protection against the cold. Through the window, the dining room was visible. The table set for two, Preston at the head, a brunette woman in what had been Caroline's seat. The courtroom watched as Preston looked up. As he made eye contact with Caroline through the glass, as he turned away, as he said something to the woman across from him, as he reached over and pulled the curtains closed. The timestamp read 7:23 p.m. The video continued. Caroline circling the house, trying other doors, other windows, her movements growing slower, more desperate, her body beginning to fail. At 7:37 p.m., she stumbled toward Helen Marsh's house. The camera tracked her until she moved out of frame. The video ended. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Whitmore removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. His expression was unreadable. Mr. Hartley, do you wish to respond to this evidence? Hartley rose. For the first time, his composure showed cracks. Your Honor, this video is incomplete. It does not show what Mr. Mitchell was doing prior to this moment. It does not. It shows him making eye contact with his pregnant wife while she froze outside and choosing to close the curtains. Diana interrupted. What more context is needed? Ms. Cross, you will wait your turn, the judge said. But his voice carried no heat. He turned back to Hartley. Continue. The video has been edited. We have no way of knowing. The video is time-stamped and unaltered. We have certification from a forensic video analyst. Diana handed a document to the bailiff. This report confirms the footage has not been manipulated in any way. Hartley's jaw tightened. We would like time to review this report before you've had 3 weeks since discovery, Diana said. If your experts had found any irregularities, you would have raised them before today. Judge Whitmore held up his hand. Enough. The video will be admitted into evidence. Mr. Hartley, if you have substantive objections to its authenticity, you may raise them. But I will not entertain delay tactics. The victory was small but significant. Carolyn felt something loosen in her chest. The truth was getting through. Diana called Helen Marsh to the stand. The elderly woman walked slowly to the witness box. Her cane clicked against the marble floor. Her white hair was neatly styled. Her floral dress was pressed and proper. She looked exactly like what she was, a grandmother, a neighbor, a witness whose testimony would be impossible to dismiss. Mrs. Marsh, Diana began after the swearing-in, can you describe what you observed on the evening of November 28th? Helen's voice was clear and strong, despite her 71 years. I was watching television, the evening news. I heard someone pounding on a door, loud, desperate, the kind of sound that makes you get up and look. What did you see? I looked out my front window. I could see the Mitchell house from there. I saw Caroline at the dining room window, pounding on the cushion, crying. I could see her breath in the cold. Did you see anyone inside the house? Yes, Preston was inside, sitting at the table. There was a woman with him, a brunette. They were eating dinner. Did Preston Mitchell appear to see his wife at the window? Helen's eyes found Preston across the courtroom. Her gaze was steady and unflinching. He looked right at her. I saw it through my window. He looked at her, and then he closed the curtains, left her out there in the cold. What did you do then? I kept watching. I was trying to figure out what was happening. Then I saw Caroline coming toward my house, stumbling, moving slow like something was wrong. And then she collapsed on my porch. Her inside, she was blue, her lips were blue. She could barely talk. I called 911. Helen's voice cracked slightly. A few minutes later, her water broke. The baby was coming, 3 weeks early, because of the cold, because of the stress, because her husband left her outside to die. Objection, Hartley was on his feet. The witness is speculating about causation. Sustained, Mrs. Marsh, please confine your testimony to what you directly observed. Helen nodded, but the damage was done. Every person in that courtroom had heard her words, had seen her face, had recognized the truth in her voice. Diana had no further questions. Hartley's cross-examination was brief and ineffective. What could he ask? The video confirmed everything Helen had said. There was no angle of attack that would not make his client look worse. Helen returned to her seat. She caught Caroline's eye as she passed, gave her a small nod. You've got this, the gesture said. Keep fighting. Diana called her next witness. Your Honor, we would like to present testimony via video link from Veronica Hale. The screen changed. Veronica's face appeared. She was in a plain room, beige walls, no identifying features. Her makeup was minimal. Her expression was serious. Preston shifted in his seat. For the first time, genuine emotion crossed his face. Anger, betrayal, the look of a man who had been stabbed by someone he thought he controlled. Ms. Hale, Diana began, can you describe your relationship with Preston Mitchell? Veronica took a breath. I was his executive assistant. For 3 years, I was also his mistress. For 4 years. The courtroom erupted again. The gavel came down. Our relationship began before his wedding to Caroline, Veronica continued. He told me their marriage was a business arrangement, that he didn't love her, that he was only waiting for the right time to divorce her. Did you believe him? Veronica's laugh was bitter. I believed everything he told me. That's how it works, isn't it? He made me feel special, chosen, like I was the only one who really knew him. Can you describe the events of Thanksgiving evening? Preston invited me to dinner at the house. He said Carolyn would be visiting her family, that we could have the evening to ourselves. Was that true? No, he knew she would be there. He planned it. He wanted her to see us together. Why would he want that? Veronica hesitated. Her eyes dropped. Because he wanted her to react, to do something that would make her look crazy. He had been working on that narrative for months, telling everyone she was unstable, paranoid. He wanted proof. What happened when Caroline arrived? She was supposed to come through the front door, walk in on us at dinner. But she went to the car first, to get something, and the door locked behind her. Was that intentional? He changed the garage code that morning, disabled the automatic locks. He wanted to make sure she couldn't get back in easily. He thought she would make a scene, break a window maybe, something he could use against her. But she didn't. No, Veronica's voice dropped. She just stood there, pounding on the glass, crying. I watched her through the window. I watched her freeze. The courtroom was completely silent now. And what did Mr. Mitchell do? He told me to ignore her, said she was being dramatic, said she needed to learn a lesson. Veronica wiped her eyes. Then he closed the curtains and poured me more wine. Preston's attorneys were conferring frantically. Preston himself sat rigid, his face a mask of controlled fury. Ms. Hale, you mentioned that Mr. Mitchell took out an insurance policy on you as well. Can you describe that? I found out 2 months ago, a $2 million policy, just like the one on Caroline, my nephew. That's when I realized I wasn't special. I was just another target. What do you mean by target? Veronica looked directly into the camera, directly at Preston. He was going to kill me too, eventually, when he got tired of me, when he found someone new. I was never his partner. I was his next victim. The cross-examination by Preston's attorneys was brutal. They attacked Veronica's credibility, her motives, her character. She was a woman scorned, a manipulator, a liar seeking revenge. But the documentation supported everything she said. The insurance policies, the text messages, the pattern of behavior. When the video link ended, Diana called Bobby Thorne to the stand. The Mitchell family attorney walked slowly to the witness box. His shoulders were hunched. His face was gray. He looked like a man who had not slept in weeks. Caroline watched him take his oath. This man had facilitated Preston's crimes for 2 decades, had helped hide assets and silence victims and maintain the facade of respectability. Now he was going to tear it all down. Mr. Thorne, Diana began, how long have you served as legal counsel to the Mitchell family? 22 years. His voice was barely above a whisper. And in that time, what matters have you handled for them? Bobby closed his eyes. Everything, business transactions, real estate deals, personal matters. He paused. Settlements. Can you elaborate on these settlements? There have been several. Over the years, women who made accusations against Preston, against his father before him. The courtroom stirred. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. What kinds of accusations? Abuse, fraud, threats. Bobby's voice steadied. In one case, a woman named Suzanne Parker accused Preston of tampering with her car brakes. She survived, barely. We settled for $3 million. She signed a non-disclosure agreement. Are you saying Preston Mitchell has attempted to harm women before? Yes. The word hung in the air. It's a pattern, a family pattern. His father was the same way. I helped cover it up. For years, I told myself I was just doing my job. But I knew. I always knew. Why are you coming forward now? Bobby looked at Caroline. His eyes were wet. Because I have a daughter about the same age as Mrs. Mitchell. And I asked myself what I would want someone to do if it were her, if she were the one being hurt. His voice broke. I couldn't live with the silence anymore. The testimony continued for another hour. Bobby detailed offshore accounts, shell companies, hidden assets, tax evasion schemes that stretched back decades. And he named names. Margaret Mitchell had been involved in almost everything. She had helped structure the trusts that hid money from the IRS. She had helped pressure women into signing settlements. She had known about her son's behavior and chosen to protect him instead of his victims. By the time Bobby stepped down from the stand, Margaret's composure had completely shattered. She sat frozen in her seat, her face ashen, her hands trembling in her lap. Her son was a monster, and she had helped create him. Diana stood for her closing argument. Your Honor, we came here today seeking custody of a child, but what we've uncovered goes far beyond custody. We've uncovered a pattern of abuse, fraud, and attempted murder stretching back over 2 decades. She walked slowly in front of the bench. Preston Mitchell is not a devoted father. He is a predator, a man who views women as possessions to be used and discarded. A man who took out insurance policies on his wife and his mistress and made plans for their deaths. She stopped. Face the judge directly. The evidence is overwhelming. The testimony is corroborated. The pattern is undeniable. We ask not only for full custody to be granted to Mrs. Mitchell, but for this matter to be referred to federal prosecutors for criminal investigation. She returned to her seat. Hartley's closing was weak, desperate. He threw everything at the wall. Conspiracy theories, character attacks, claims of evidence tampering. None of it stuck. Judge Whitmore listened with his hands folded. His expression remained neutral throughout. But when Hartley finished, something shifted in his eyes. He removed his glasses, rubbed them slowly with a cloth. The courtroom waited. I have been a judge for 23 years, he finally said. In that time, I have seen many things. Good people in bad situations. Bad people pretending to be good. Liars and truth-tellers. Saints and sinners. He put his glasses back on. But I have rarely seen evidence as damning as what has been presented today. The video footage alone would be sufficient to grant Mrs. Mitchell's petition. The insurance policies raise serious criminal concerns. The testimony of Ms. Hale and Mr. Thorne paints a picture of systematic abuse, stretching back decades. He looked at Preston. Mr. Mitchell, I have watched you sit in this courtroom today. I have watched your composure, your confidence, the way you looked at your wife as if she were an inconvenience rather than a human being you once promised to love and protect. Preston's mask cracked, his jaw tightened. I've seen men like you before, men who believe their money and their charm put them above the law, above common decency, above the basic obligation to treat other human beings with respect. The judge's voice hardened. You are wrong. He picked up his gavel. In the matter of custody, I am granting full custody of the minor child, Grace Elizabeth Mitchell, to her mother, Carolyn Mitchell. The father's visitation rights are hereby suspended pending criminal investigation. A restraining order is granted, prohibiting Mr. Mitchell from coming within 500 feet of Mrs. Mitchell or the child. The gavel came down. Preston shot to his feet. This is ridiculous. This is a witch hunt. She planned all of this. She manipulated everyone. Mr. Mitchell, you will sit down and remain silent. No, I will not sit down. That's my daughter. My property. You can't. Your property. The judge's voice was ice. Mr. Mitchell, a child is not property. A wife is not property. The women you have harmed over the years are not property. They are human beings, and you will face justice for what you have done to them. He nodded to the bailiff. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to federal prosecutors. The evidence presented today suggests criminal conduct, including fraud, tax evasion, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Federal marshals entered. Two men in dark suits. They had been waiting. Diana had made arrangements. They walked down the center aisle. The courtroom watched in stunned silence. Preston Mitchell, you are under arrest. They read him his rights. They cuffed him in front of everyone. His perfect suit, his perfect hair, his perfect facade crumbling like a sandcastle in high tide. He looked at Caroline as they led him away. The hatred in his eyes was absolute, pure, the look of a predator who had finally been caged. This isn't over, he said. I will destroy you. I will. That's enough. The marshal pulled him toward the door. Caroline met his gaze, held it, did not look away. Yes, she said quietly. It is. They took him out the side door. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Reporters rushed for the exit, desperate to file their stories. Spectators talked over each other. The bailiff called for order, but no one listened. Margaret Mitchell sat frozen in her seat, watching her son disappear in handcuffs. Her face showed no emotion. 30 years of practiced composure held even now, but her hands were shaking. Diana touched Caroline's arm. It's done. Caroline nodded, but she felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just exhaustion. And beneath that, something that might someday become peace. I need to see my daughter. She walked out of the courtroom, through the case, through the reporters shouting questions, through the crowd that parted before her. Denise was waiting in the hallway. Grace was in her arms, sleeping peacefully. It's all over the news, Denise said. Her eyes were wet. Everyone's talking about it. You did it, Caroline. You actually did it. Caroline took her daughter, held her close, let the tears fall. We did it, she whispered. All of us, together. Helen Marsh appeared beside them. Samuel Crawford, Dr. Vance, Diana Cross, all the people who had believed her when no one else would, who had stood by her when the world seemed determined to crush her. Let's go home, Carolyn said. They walked out of the courthouse together, into the cold winter air, into a world that had been fundamentally changed. Behind them, the marble building stood silent, a monument to justice. Today, for once, justice had actually been served. 1 year later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Caroline's apartment, painting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. She stood at the kitchen counter, coffee cup in hand, watching Grace toddle across the living room with determined steps. 11 months old, walking already. Her pediatrician said she was advanced for her age. Carolyn thought she was simply stubborn, determined, unwilling to accept that she could not do something, like her mother. Mama, Grace pointed at the balloon bouquet tied to the dining room chair, pink and purple and silver. Baoon. That's right, baby girl. Balloons for your birthday. Grace's birthday. 1 year since that terrible, wonderful night. 1 year since Caroline had nearly frozen to death on her own front porch. 1 year since Grace had entered the world 3 weeks early, fighting for life just like her mother. So much had changed since then. So much had healed, and some things had not healed at all, just scarred over, the wounds still tender beneath the surface. Caroline took a sip of her coffee. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, in a modest complex on the edge of town, nothing like the Mitchell estate with its columns and chandeliers and hollow grandeur. But it was hers, really hers, paid for with the settlement that had come after Preston's assets were seized and liquidated. Enough to start over, enough to build something new. The doorbell rang. Grace's head swiveled toward the sound. "Door," she announced. "Door, Mama." "I heard it, sweetheart." Carolyn crossed to the entrance, checked the peephole, smiled. Denise stood on the welcome mat, holding a cake box. Samuel was behind her, carrying wrapped presents. "Birthday delivery," Denise announced when Caroline opened the door. 1 year old, can you believe it? Some days, no. Caroline stepped aside to let them in. Some days it feels like a decade. Other days it feels like yesterday. Denise set the cake box on the counter and immediately scooped up Grace, who squealed with delight. "There's my favorite goddaughter. Look how big you've gotten. Look at those cheeks." "She's your only goddaughter," Carolyn pointed out, "which makes her automatically my favorite. That's just math." Samuel set the presents on the coffee table and gave Caroline a one-armed hug. "How are you holding up? Big day." "I'm good. Really good, actually." Carolyn smiled. "Better than I expected." And it was true. She had dreaded this anniversary for weeks, had braced herself for the memories to come flooding back. The cold, the fear, the sound of her own fists against glass that would not break. But standing here in her sunny apartment, watching her daughter laugh in her godmother's arms, the memories felt distant, like something that had happened to someone else, someone she used to mind. But the doorbell rang again and again and again. Within an hour, the small apartment was full of people. Helen Marsh moving slowly with her cane but refusing any help. Dr. Vance, who had delivered Grace and now asked about every developmental milestone with professional interest. Diana Cross, who had become something closer to a friend than an attorney. Even Veronica came. She arrived last, hesitant, standing in the doorway as if unsure of her welcome. Caroline met her at the entrance. "You came. You invited me." Veronica's voice was soft. "I wasn't sure if you meant it." "I meant it." They looked at each other, two women who had been enemies, who had been rivals for a man who had never deserved either of them, who had found their way to something that was not quite friendship, but was not hostility either. "I brought something for Grace." Veronica held up a small wrapped package. "It's just a children's book, about butterflies, I thought." She stopped, swallowed. "I don't know what I thought, I just wanted to give her something." Carolyn took the package. "Thank you. She'll love it." Veronica looked around the apartment, at the modest furniture, the second-hand decorations, the life that Caroline had built from the wreckage of her marriage. "This is nice," she said. "It feels, I don't know, real." "It is real. That's the whole point." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. "How's the shelter?" Caroline asked. Veronica had been working at a women's shelter for 6 months now, helping other victims of domestic abuse, trying to make amends the only way she knew how. "Hard," Veronica admitted. "Some days I think I can't do it anymore. The stories, the pain, it's overwhelming. But you keep going." "I have to. It's the only thing that makes me feel like I'm worth something. Like I'm more than just the other woman, the homewrecker, the villain." Carolyn considered her words carefully. "You're not a villain, Veronica. You made mistakes. We all made mistakes. But you're trying to fix them. That counts for something." Veronica's eyes glistened. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Probably not." Carolyn's voice was matter-of-fact. Not cruel, just honest. "But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. Carrying hatred is exhausting, and I don't have the energy for it anymore." Veronica nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Now come inside. Have some cake. Watch my daughter smash frosting all over her face. It's going to be adorable." The party unfolded in the way of all good gatherings. Conversation flowed. Laughter echoed. Grace became the center of attention, delighted by the fuss, completely unaware of the darkness that had surrounded her birth. Caroline moved through the room, playing hostess, accepting congratulations, fielding questions about her plans for the future. Because there were plans now, real plans, not just survival. Phoenix Events. That was the name she had chosen for her new business. An event planning company specializing in charity galas and fundraisers. The same work she had done before her marriage, before Preston had slowly convinced her to give up her career and focus on being his wife. The first event was scheduled for next month. a benefit for domestic abuse survivors. The venue was donated, the catering was donated. The guest list included several prominent society figures who had watched Preston's downfall and decided they wanted to be on the right side of history. It was not the life she had imagined for herself, but it was a life she had chosen, and that made all the difference. At 2 o'clock, Denise dimmed the lights. Samuel lit the single candle on the small cake. Everyone gathered around as Caroline held Grace before the flickering flame. "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you." The voices blended, in perfect harmony, the most beautiful sound Caroline had ever heard. "Happy birthday, dear Grace. Happy birthday to you." Grace stared at the candle with wide eyes. She reached for it. Caroline caught her hand gently. "Blow, baby, like this." She demonstrated, puffing air toward the flame. Grace watched intently. Then she tried to imitate the motion. A spray of baby spit extinguished the candle. Everyone cheered. Grace looked startled by the noise, then delighted. She clapped her hands and laughed. "Cake time," Denise announced. They put Grace in her high chair, set a small piece of cake before her. Everyone waited, phones at the ready. Grace looked at the cake, looked at her mother, looked at the assembled guests. Then she plunged both hands into the frosting and smeared it across her face. The room erupted in laughter and camera clicks. Grace grinned through her mask of vanilla buttercream, pleased with herself, with her audience, with this strange ritual she did not understand but clearly approved of. Caroline took picture after picture, storing up moments, building a treasure chest of memories that would someday help Grace understand where she came from, who had loved her, how fiercely she had been wanted and protected. The party wound down slowly. Guests departed in twos and threes, offering hugs and birthday wishes and promises to keep in touch. By 5 o'clock, only Carolyn and Grace remained. The apartment was quiet. Wrapping paper littered the floor. Cake crumbs decorated the high chair tray. Grace sat among her presents, playing with a stuffed elephant that Helen had given her, completely content. Carolyn lowered herself onto the couch. Exhaustion settled over her like a blanket, a good exhaustion, the kind that came after something meaningful. She looked around the small apartment, at the life she had built from nothing, at the child she had protected against all odds. The doorbell rang. Caroline frowned. Everyone had already left. She was not expecting anyone else. She checked the peephole. A courier in a brown uniform stood on the mat, holding an envelope. She opened the door. "Caroline Mitchell." "Yes." "Sign here, please." She signed the electronic pad, took the envelope, closed the door. The return address was a law firm, not Diana's firm, Preston's attorneys. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Even now, months after his arrest, the fear response remained. Pavlovian, automatic. The document inside was brief, legal language wrapped around a simple message. "I, Preston Mitchell, hereby voluntarily and permanently waive all parental rights to the minor child Grace Elizabeth Mitchell. This waiver is irrevocable and made without coercion or duress. I acknowledge that this decision terminates all legal rights and responsibilities toward the child, including but not limited to custody, visitation, and inheritance claims." Carolyn read it twice, 3 times, 4 times. The words did not change. He had given up. Completely. Permanently. She should have felt triumph, victory, the final defeat of the man who had tried to destroy her. Instead, she felt something unexpected, something like grief. Not for Preston, not for her marriage, but for the father Grace would never have, for the fantasy of the happy family that had never been real. Then the grief passed, and in its place came something else, freedom. The last legal chain that bound her to Preston Mitchell had been severed. There would be no custody battle stretching into the future. No visitation negotiations. No uncomfortable handoffs. No having to watch her daughter spend time with a man she knew to be a monster. It was over. Truly over. Caroline set the document on the coffee table, crossed to where Grace sat playing with her elephant. "Hey, baby girl." Grace looked up, smiled. "Mama. Can I hold you for a minute?" Grace raised her arms. Caroline scooped her up, carried her to the window. The sun was setting. Orange and pink and purple streaked across the sky. The first stars were beginning to appear. "See that?" Caroline said softly. That's the world out there. Your world, full of possibilities, full of adventures waiting to happen. Grace grabbed a handful of Caroline's hair and tried to put it in her mouth. You're going to grow up knowing you're loved, really loved, not the kind of love that comes with conditions and control. The real kind, the kind that wants you to be happy, to be yourself, to be free. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, standing outside that frost-covered window, pounding on glass that would not break, watching her husband choose cruelty over love. That woman had been terrified, broken, convinced that she was worthless without the man who treated her like property. That woman was gone now. The woman who remained was different, stronger, wiser, scarred but not shattered, wounded but still standing. She had learned things in the past year, hard lessons, painful lessons, but valuable ones. She had learned that the people who claimed to love her could be the ones who hurt her most. She had learned that strength was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She had learned that she did not need anyone's permission to save herself. She had learned that starting over was not a failure, but an opportunity. She had learned that she was enough, just as she was, without the mansion, without the status, without the man she had thought completed her. She was enough. Grace yawned. Her eyes were growing heavy. The excitement of the day was catching up with her. Carolyn carried her to the nursery. A small room, painted soft yellow, a crib against one wall, a rocking chair by the window. The same rocking chair from Denise's guest room. She had kept it as a reminder of where she had been, how far she had come. She settled into the chair. Grace curled against her chest. "Let me tell you a story," Carolyn murmured, "about a woman who thought she had lost everything and found out she had everything she needed all along." Grace's breathing slowed, her eyes drifted closed. Once upon a time, there was a woman named Caroline. She lived in a big, beautiful house. She wore pretty dresses. She went to fancy parties. Everyone thought she had the perfect life. The room was quiet, only the creak of the rocking chair, the soft sound of a baby sleeping. But the house wasn't really hers, and the perfect life was a lie, and the man she thought loved her was a monster in disguise. Carolyn's voice dropped to a whisper. One cold winter night, the monster showed his true face. He tried to hurt her. He tried to destroy her. He tried to take everything she had. She pressed a kiss to Grace's forehead. But he failed because the woman was stronger than he knew. Stronger than she knew. She fought back. She found allies. She discovered that the people who really loved her had been there all along. She just had not been able to see them through the monster's shadow. Grace sighed in her sleep, a sound of perfect contentment. The woman built a new life, a smaller life, a simpler life, but a real life, a life filled with love that did not hurt, with friends who showed up when it mattered, with a daughter who was the greatest gift she had ever received. Carolyn stood carefully, laid Grace in her crib, covered her with a soft blanket. And the woman learned something important. She learned that she had been trapped in a prison all along, a beautiful prison with crystal chandeliers and marble floors, but a prison nonetheless. She stood over the crib, watching her daughter sleep. The prison door had been unlocked all along. She had just been too afraid to walk through it, too trained to doubt herself, too beaten down to believe she deserved anything better. Grace's chest rose and fell, peaceful, safe. But she did deserve better. She always had. And once she finally believed it, nothing could stop her. Carolyn backed slowly out of the nursery, left the door cracked open. The nightlight cast a soft glow across the sleeping baby. She returned to the living room, to the coffee table where the legal document sat waiting. She picked it up, read it one more time. Preston Mitchell hereby waives all parental rights. She folded the paper carefully, placed it in a drawer with other important documents. Birth certificate, social security card, the artifacts of a life in progress. Then she poured herself a glass of wine, the good stuff, the bottles she had been saving. She carried it to the window, the same window where she had stood so many times over the past year, watching the seasons change, watching her daughter grow, watching herself transform. The stars were out now, hundreds of them, thousands, A universe of possibility spread across the dark sky. To new beginnings, she said softly. A toast to no one. To everyone. To herself. She took a sip. The wine was excellent. She had forgotten how good excellent wine could taste. There would be challenges ahead. There always were. The business was just starting. Money would be tight. Single motherhood was relentlessly difficult. The scars of her marriage would take years to fully heal, if they ever did. But she was ready for all of it, for whatever came next, because she had survived the worst, had walked through fire and emerged on the other side, not unburned, not unchanged, but alive. And that was everything. She thought about the story she would tell Grace someday, when she was old enough to understand. The story of how she came into the world. The story of her father and what he had done. The story of her mother and how she had fought. It would not be an easy story to tell, but it would be a true one. And Grace deserved the truth, deserved to know that she came from strength, that she was wanted, that she was loved, that she was enough, just as she was. Caroline drained the last of her wine, set the glass aside, walked to the apartment door. Tomorrow would be work, phone calls, meetings, the endless machinery of building a new life. But tonight there was only this: a quiet apartment, a sleeping child, a future that belonged to her. She turned off the lights, one by one, until only the stars remained, shining through the windows, keeping watch over a mother and daughter who had survived and against all odds. "Good night, Grace," she whispered toward the nursery. "Sleep tight. Mama loves you." She went to bed, slept deeply, dreamed of nothing. And in the morning she rose with the sun, ready to begin again. Yeah. Epilogue. 3 years later, the ballroom of the Westwood Hotel glittered with crystal and candlelight. 300 guests in evening wear circled tables draped in white linen. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner. Champagne flowed like water. The annual Phoenix Foundation Gala, the third such event, and the most successful yet. Carolyn stood at the edge of the room watching her creation unfold. Her hair was styled elegantly. Her dress was emerald green. She had bought it on sale and tailored it herself, but no one would ever know. Impressive turnout. Diana Cross appeared beside her, champagne glass in hand. "Better than last year." Carolyn smiled. "We might actually hit our fundraising goal." "You'll exceed it. The silent auction alone is going to make a killing." The Phoenix Foundation, born from pain, dedicated to helping survivors of domestic abuse rebuild their lives, legal assistance, counseling services, emergency housing, job training, everything Carolyn had needed during her own darkest hours. The foundation had started small, a few donations, a handful of volunteers, but it had grown quickly. Word spread. Media coverage helped. The Mitchell scandal had made Caroline temporarily famous, and she had chosen to use that fame for something meaningful. "Have you seen the latest numbers?" Diana asked. "The shelter expansion is fully funded. We can break ground next month." "I saw." Carolyn felt a warm glow of satisfaction. "Helen Marsh donated another 50,000. That woman is something else. She says she's just returning the favor." Caroline thought of the night Helen had opened her door to find a frozen pregnant woman collapsed on her porch. "I think she's earned the right to call it whatever she wants." A small figure in a pink dress came running across the ballroom floor. "Mommy, Mommy!" Carolyn crouched down to catch her daughter. "Hey, sweet girl, are you having fun?" "The big cake is so big," Grace announced breathlessly. "It has flowers made of sugar." "I know, I ordered that cake. Can I have some? Please, please, please." "Well, after dinner, I promise." Grace accepted this with the grave seriousness of a 4-year-old who had been trained to negotiate. "Okay, but a big piece. The biggest piece." Grace beamed and ran back to where Denise and Samuel were keeping an eye on her. Denise waved. Samuel gave a thumbs up. Diana watched her go. "She's gotten so big." "They do that, apparently. And she looks just like you." Carolyn smiled. It was true. Grace had inherited her mother's brown eyes, her mother's stubborn chin, her mother's refusal to accept limitations. She had inherited nothing visible from her father, nothing except a trust fund that Caroline had set aside for her education, money from the Mitchell estate, blood money, some might call it. But Caroline preferred to think of it as reparations, as the least Preston could do for the daughter he had abandoned. Preston himself was serving year 7 of a 15-year federal sentence. Fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy. The attempted murder charges had been harder to prove, but the other crimes had been enough. He would be an old man when he got out, if he got out. Caroline had not thought about him in months. He had become irrelevant. A footnote in a story that had long since moved on. Margaret Mitchell had avoided prison, but lost everything else. The mansion, the social standing, the carefully constructed facade of respectability. Last Caroline had heard, she was living in a small apartment in Florida. Alone. Forgotten. Bobby Thorne had kept his license. Barely. He had cooperated fully with federal prosecutors and received immunity in exchange for his testimony. He had sent Caroline a letter after the trial. An apology. She had read it once and thrown it away. Some apologies were too little, too late. Veronica still worked at the shelter. They were not friends exactly, but they were not enemies either. They had found a way to coexist, to acknowledge the complicated web that connected them without letting it define them. The jazz quartet shifted to a new song. Couples began drifting onto the dance floor. "You should dance," Diana said. "It's your party." "Maybe later. Right now I'm enjoying watching it all work." She meant it. This was her favorite part of the evening, seeing the pieces come together, knowing that every dollar raised tonight would help someone escape the kind of nightmare she had barely survived. A man approached from the crowd, tall, dark hair going gray at the temples, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Ms. Mitchell, wonderful event." "Thank you to Harrison. I'm glad you could make it." David Harrison, a trauma therapist who volunteered at the foundation. They had met 6 months ago at a planning meeting, had coffee a few times since. Nothing serious, nothing pressured, just two adults enjoying each other's company. "I was wondering," David said, "if you might have a dance available later, when you're less busy." Carolyn felt herself smile, a real smile, not the practiced social smile she had worn for years at Mitchell family functions. "I might have one available. Check back in an hour." "I'll do that." He nodded and moved away. Diana raised an eyebrow. "Who was that?" "Someone I've been getting to know." "Getting to know how exactly?" Slowly, very slowly. Carolyn watched David disappear into the crowd. "I'm not ready for anything serious. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But he's patient and kind, and he doesn't set off any of my alarm bells. That's a start. It's enough for now." The evening continued. Speeches were made, awards were given, the silent auction exceeded expectations. The live auction exceeded those expectations. At 10 o'clock, Caroline took the stage for the closing remarks. She looked out at the sea of faces, supporters, friends, strangers who had become allies. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Your generosity will change lives. I know that sounds like a cliche, but I know it's true because my life was changed by the generosity of others." She paused, took a breath. 4 years ago, I was standing outside my own home, freezing, pregnant, watching my husband eat dinner with another woman while I pounded on the glass. The room was silent. Everyone knew the story, but hearing it from Caroline directly was something different. I thought that was the worst night of my life. And in many ways it was, but it was also the beginning of my real life. The night I stopped being someone's wife, someone's possession, someone's victim. The night I started being myself. She thought of Grace, somewhere in the crowd with Denise and Samuel, probably asleep by now. I survived because people helped me. A neighbor who opened her door. A friend who gave me a place to stay. A lawyer who believed me when no one else would. A community that refused to let me fall. Her voice strengthened. That's what the Phoenix Foundation's about. Not charity, community, people helping people. Because no one should have to survive alone. No one should have to rebuild alone. And no one should have to fight alone. She raised her glass. To everyone in this room who has given time, money, or simply kindness to someone in need. You are the foundation. You are the reason survivors become thrivers. You are the reason hope exists. The room raised their glasses with her. To new beginnings. To new beginnings. The applause was warm and genuine. Caroline stepped off the stage, immediately surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. She worked the room for another hour, thanking donors, accepting compliments, doing the work of keeping the foundation running. Finally, at midnight, she slipped away, found Denise in a quiet corner, holding a sleeping Grace. Time to go. She crashed about an hour ago, tried to stay awake for the cake, but lost the battle. Carolyn gathered her daughter in her arms. Grace stirred but did not wake, just snuggled closer. Thank you for everything, for tonight, for the past 4 years, for all of it. Denise smiled. That's what sisters do. They were not sisters, not by blood, but by something stronger, by choice, by loyalty, by the bond forged in crisis and strengthened by time. Carolyn carried Grace out of the ballroom, through the hotel lobby, into the cool night air. Her car was waiting, a modest sedan, nothing flashy, nothing pretentious, just reliable transportation for a woman who had learned that the value of things was not measured by their price tag. She strapped Grace into her car seat. The little girl murmured something unintelligible. Caroline kissed her forehead. Good night, baby girl. You did great today. She climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, pulled out of the hotel parking lot. The city lights glittered around her. A universe of possibility, of challenges, of opportunities. She thought about the woman she had been, the woman who had believed that love meant sacrifice, that marriage meant surrender, that her worth was measured by her husband's approval. That woman was gone. The woman who remained was something different, something stronger, something she had not known she could become. A survivor, a mother, a leader, a force. She drove home through empty streets, parked in her usual spot, carried Grace up to their apartment. The rooms were dark, quiet, familiar. She tucked Grace into bed, kissed her one more time, stood in the doorway watching her sleep. You're going to change the world someday, she whispered. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I know you will, because you come from strength, because you are loved, because you are enough. She closed the door softly, walked to her own bedroom, slipped out of her evening gown into comfortable pajamas, stood at the window. The stars were out, the same stars she had watched on the night Grace was born, the night her old life ended, the night her real life began. She thought about everything she had lost, the mansion, the status, the illusion of security. She thought about everything she had gained, her daughter, her purpose, herself. The trade had not been fair. Nothing about her story had been fair, but she had made it through, had built something beautiful from the wreckage, had become someone she was proud to be. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Carolyn drew the curtains closed, climbed into bed, closed her eyes. Tomorrow there would be more work, more challenges, more opportunities to help people who needed help. But tonight there was only this: a quiet apartment, a sleeping child, a woman who had finally found her way home, to herself. And that is how Caroline Mitchell walked out of that courtroom, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a mother, a woman who refused to let a monster define her story. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, I need to ask you a small favor. Hit that like button. It takes 1 second, but it tells me that stories like this matter to you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you think. Tell me what part hit you the hardest. Tell me if you have ever known someone like Caroline or someone like Preston. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. A friend, a sister, a mother, someone who might be going through their own dark night. Let them know they are not alone. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel. Click that notification bell so you never miss another story, because I have more stories like this one. Stories of women who were underestimated, women who were betrayed, women who rose from the ashes and built something beautiful. Stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, make you believe that justice still exists in this world. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It means more than you know. I will see you in the next one.